Welcome back to Morning Joe. Live picture of the White House, 7:35 in the morning on the East Coast. The Biden administration is preparing to respond formally to Russia's poisoning and jailing of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Politico reports President Biden will work with European countries to launch sanctions against Russia in the coming weeks. People familiar with the matter telling Politico, quote, the response would mark a break with the previous administration, which prepared a sanctions package following Navalny's poisoning, but never implemented it. The Politico report continues. It would also constitute the new administration's first major step in holding Russia accountable for human rights abuses, which Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken have listed as a key pillar of their foreign policy agenda. The administration launched a review of U.S.-Russia policy last month that is not yet complete. Let's bring in Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post national security reporter Joby Warrick. He is author of the new book, Red Line, The Unraveling of Syria and America's Race to Destroy the Most Dangerous Arsenal in the World. Joby, good morning. Congratulations on the book. So let's reset here and talk about where you pick up the story. We're in 2012. Assad effectively is launching a war on his own people. Where do you pick up the story?
Well, actually pick up very early on in this conflict, because it turns out the United States had a spy inside Syria's weapons program. And for years, we were getting sophisticated information about what the Syrians were up to. And the reality is that Syria had quite an important chemical weapons program, a real weapon of mass destruction. And so when Arab Spring starts, we have really good detail about exactly what Assad has and how dangerous it is, because within that arsenal are things like sarin and VX. It's scattered around the country. The country's being torn apart by a civil war. There are bad guys coming in, including ISIS. And so this becomes a real danger moment for the United States and the world, the possibility that someone was going to plunder one of those stockpiles. And you could just imagine what the effect would be if just a few liters of sarin ended up in a Western country or in the United States.
Well, yeah, as you write about in the book, there's the domestic war that Assad is launching on his own people. There's that humanitarian threat. And then you report in the book that al-Qaeda and other Islamist terrorists were trying to get their hands on some of those weapons. How close did they get to obtaining them?
Well, very close, actually, in a couple of cases. By 2013, al-Nusra, which is essentially an al-Qaeda organization, was on the brink, was at the edge of some of these facilities where weapons were kept. And that's why, you know, as much criticism as Obama has gotten for his red line comments, there was real concern in the White House. This was going to be a global peril. And it was not just the Islamists on the Sunni side. There was Hezbollah, which is operating inside Syria. And there were indications in 2012 that Assad was about to give some of those weapons to Hezbollah for safekeeping, perhaps, or for whatever reason. But Hezbollah, as we know, has thousands of artillery rockets aimed at Israel from right across the border in Lebanon. And for them to have sarin or VX in those rockets was quite a scary prospect.
Good morning. It's Casey Hunt. Can you take us from what you just outlined there into present day? You mentioned Obama, the criticism that he got at the time for the red line comments and then the way that they handled or failed to handle what happened next. Then obviously President Trump comes into office, sees images of Syrian children and reacts much, much differently. How did we get from one of those places to the other? And what does it tell you about the future in terms of these very scary weapons programs?
Well, the caveat, I think, for both administrations is our Syria policy has been a failure. We failed to do the things we needed to do to stop the refugee flows, to stabilize the region. All of that was a complete failure, and I think anyone in the Obama administration would admit that. The difference is that a decision was made by Trump to respond to chemical weapons attacks with missile strikes, and that was applauded at the time as we're being tough, we're enforcing the red line. Going back and reconstructing what happened, it didn't really make that much of an impact, because Syria lost a few aircraft. Its planes were running again hours later, dropping more barrel bombs. And more importantly, it didn't deter Assad, who was going on and using chemical weapons months later. So neither president was able to completely deter Assad. But what we did do during Obama's time was to eliminate this huge stockpile, 1,300 tons of chemical weapons. Not everything. Assad cheated. He kept some of it back. He used some of it again. But his production equipment and the bulk of his stockpile, a strategic military weapon, was taken out in 9 months during the middle of the Civil War. And that itself was one of the greatest disarmament feats of recent time, because it's never happened before in such a compressed way. So that part of it probably gets underlooked. Syria's citizens would say it didn't stop the suffering, but it did stop things from getting worse, because still today, the most deadly single day of the Syrian conflict was in August 2013, when a few artillery shells containing sarin dropped on a suburb of Damascus. 1,400 people killed in just a few hours. So it is a dangerous weapon and a danger to the Syrians. It's a good thing that it's gone, or most of it's gone now.
As you know, Joby, there are stacks of evidence of war crimes committed by President Assad. Will he ever face a jury? Will he ever face real consequences as the leader of Syria?
This is the key point, and I think this is one of the jobs for Biden, as he's in office now, is to try to hold Assad to account.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.